There are few things that a video game player enjoys more than video games, but at the top of the list, you have money. After all, money is how you acquire video games. And on the flip side, you can trade your video games for money by selling them. Some people even consider video games and money to be interchangeable currencies. In fact, to pay my pizza guy one time, boom, that ought to cover it. Keep the change as a tip. But then I had a change of heart and purchased it again the next day. Darn, but that can happen. People regret stuff, whether it's a copy of Super Mario RPG you let go, or an entire 10-year stretch of your life. Oops-a-daisy, made a mistakey. And why some people hesitate to be too trigger-happy about selling their games, or anything else of value, especially since there's certain things that once you sell them aren't so easy to get back. I sold my dignity a long time ago, but don't worry, I found a different, better one. But when it comes to video games and selling them, it sure seems like it's more common to hear about people lamenting the fact they sold a game. You rarely hear people say, "Gosh, I'm so glad I sold that game," especially since it's so easy to remember a specific game as opposed to some random amount of money that you had for a brief period of time years ago before you spent it on goodness knows what. Unless that goodness knows what was video games. Hey, and we're back in business. It's pretty common to sell video games in order to buy video games. That's what happens when you're at the top of the totem pole. But yes, naturally, there are those who skip the whole selling part and just focus on the buying part. I'd imagine these are some of the same people who eat just the cream filling and don't bother with the cookie. So with that said, let's talk about some of the reasons people don't sell their games, and the most simple reason is that some people simply don't sell their stuff. It's just not something they do, like flossing. Hey, it's never too late to start. But not selling your games doesn't mean there's something wrong with you if there isn't an urgent need for money, space, or anything else it is that motivates people to sell games. Then they may just not even bother to consider it, in which case I'm here to say maybe you should. Because here's the thing about considering doing something, you can always just end up not doing it. There were a few girls who considered going to my high school prom with me. Guess how many of those turned into a yes? I think a big part of what deters a lot of people from selling their games is that there's such a large potential for getting burned and getting burned hard by it. For many people, they have been burned in the past, and dare I say, it's been traumatic enough to deter them from doing it again in the future. Some of the more common ways that I've heard of this happening to people is, sure enough, when they were kids. Maybe they got rid of games because it was the only way to pay for the next console that had come out, having no idea they'd love older games as much as they do now. Perhaps got ripped off by trading them into a game store, or heck, if you were really lucky, maybe your parents just threw them out or gave them away. What I always envy is the occasional person who says their parents made them keep all their consoles and games they had as a kid, or stored them away in the attic for years so that your adult self could come back and get them. Way to go, Mom. Way to go, Dad. Whereas most parents will save things like old half-used candles, but when it comes to that copy of Chrono Trigger, no cigar. Remembering certain games or consoles you used to have that you no longer do can leave a nasty taste that makes you think, I will never let that happen again. Because even if you can buy the same games back and they're just inanimate pieces of plastic, it's just not the same as having the exact one you had as a kid. Eat your heart out, Timmy. So perhaps you've been conditioned to just think that selling games is never a good idea. But I'm here to say it definitely can be, for some people at least, because don't forget now, I'm just asking you to simply consider it. Because remember, considering doing something can still end in just not doing it. So get up and sing and dance it with me. Consideration does not mean saying yes. And I'll even do you one better. If you come away from this video feeling like you still don't want to sell any of your games, you're going to feel even better about that decision. Remember, I'm the do whatever personally makes you happy guy. Whatever you decide, you'll feel better about your choice. You can't lose. Okay, so why don't we start with the basics? And it doesn't get any more basic than you need to sell some of your games because you need money to live. Now, a lot of us would argue that you need video games to live. I tried going without for a month once. Kind of a blur to me now, but my wife says I just didn't seem quite right. To her, the biggest red flag was that I stopped eating bananas. But if you need extra money due to some sort of financial issues you may be having, I don't think anybody will blame you to sell some of your games to take care of yourself, take care of the people you love, and all that good stuff. The next big reason for selling some games is to free up space. Although, can something like this cute little cartridge really be blamed for space issues? If it's got enough friends, it can be, because when gamers go getting games, they can go hard. One game certainly isn't enough, and it can get to the point where it seems like no amount of games is enough. I mean, if you own hundreds of games, what's a couple hundred more? But here's the thing, for some people, having a lot of games is going to make them happy with no negative effects on the side. But that's certainly not everyone, I understand that. So, quick little test for you that I recommend. Basically, just do a quick evaluation of how organized and tidy your collection is, how put away things are, that sort of stuff. And if it's not, try cleaning it up. A lot of times, the issue isn't so much space as it is organization. Somebody could have a boatload of games that feels like it takes up far less space than a much smaller collection that's scattered all over the place. So start with the easy stuff, and look at you, you're on the path to a more tidy collection. And then perhaps space isn't such an issue. Okay, but regardless if you would like more space, or even if space isn't an issue, the biggest thing you may need to be convinced on is this: which games would I sell? And besides money, what is the benefit of parting with those games? I mean, having a game is better than not having it, right? Well, I like to look at it like this. Your games are your friends. You've got your best friends and you've got your not so best friends. And like any friends, you've only got so much time to spend with each of them, especially when you consider all the other things that require your time. I mean, we've done the calculations before, folks. Add it all up and you're simply not going to live long enough to make it, no matter how many nanners you eat. Oh, and get this, some people actually like to replay some of their favorites. What idiots! Talk about a waste of time. As you can see, the picture I'm painting is that by selling off certain games, it allows you to focus more on the games left over, whether you've already played them once or not. With the idea being to get back to more of how many of us were as kids, where sure you may have only owned like 9 games, but boy, gosh, girl, golly girl, gilly, were those 9 games loved properly and to death. Now, maybe you don't want to consolidate all the way down to 9 games because, you know, in some ways that kind of sucks, but find the amount of games that works for you, a good balance of enough to play to really dig in, but not so much that you feel like your games are drowning you. For so many of us, there you are. It's that time of day where you take your nightly gander at your games to pick one out to play, but they're all staring back at you. Each one hoping to be the one you choose. Pressure's on now, buckaroo banzai. And that's the key word, pressure. What the heck is that doing in the hobby you love? And sure, it'll vary by person, but there's absolutely people who feel pressure to play certain games and even guilty about not playing certain ones. I know some people who feel more guilty about not playing Earthbound than they do about not calling their own mother, and if they'd actually played Earthbound, they'd understand the irony of that. So if a game is making you feel pressure or anything negative at all, you don't have to play it, let alone keep it. I won't tell anybody. Of course, another simple solution is to keep keep a game but just not care about playing it, being content with owning a game but never playing it, or at least not very often, which for some people might be easy, or for others it might be hard. Either way, I think it's a good question to ask yourself to justify why you own something. For me personally, I think of it like if you want to be on my shelf, you gotta earn it, buddy. And the games I own are a finely tuned curation and a reflection of my tastes. People are always surprised I don't own more games than I do when they hear the total number, and it's because I've been pretty aggressive about consolidating and curating despite having a lot of consoles. But like I've been saying, that's just what works for me, and it'll vary for each of you. Are you somebody who throws a party and only wants your closest friends there? Or do you throw a rager where sure, you ignore or give barely any attention to a large majority of them, but they're all still welcome anyway, and you enjoy the spectacle of it. I mean, some of the ones you never get to can just have fun with each other. I've heard that Rascal Racers and BC Racers have had some great conversations together before. I think when it comes down to it, what really makes things tricky is that you simply don't know how you're going to feel about getting rid of a game 20 years from now. And sure, you could always buy it back, but it still feels like rolling the dice since the price can go up. Okay, but let's say you do decide you want to sell some of your games. Part of the is it worth it or not equation is still the process of actually selling them, which for some people can be a hassle. Creating online listings, printing out shipping labels, packing it up, getting it to the post office, not to mention all the fees and cost of shipping. My suggestion is always to try to sell locally, ideally to a friend or somebody you know. That way you can be assured it's going to good hands and you're helping them out. Assuming your friend isn't a turd, those friends are preferable if you ask me. Heck, you can even give them the games for free or for a deal. My gosh, you give away games for free and you'll have no trouble at all parting with them. Retro gamers can sense free games from miles away. But if you do want to try to sell your games in the open market, my rule of thumb for selling games, however you do it, is to always go just a tad below the current market price. That way it will sell quickly, won't inflate the game's market price any further, give somebody a fair deal, but still isn't so low that they'll be looking to turn around and flip it. They'll be purchasing it to keep it and hopefully love it. Another suggestion is to trade it to your local game shop, which not everybody loves their local game shop, but if you do, it's a great way to help out their business. Oh, and I think it's definitely worth mentioning that one train of thought I've seen trending more and more is that with all the different ways there are to play games now, you don't necessarily need to hang on to all your old games. Whether it's due to re-releases, EverDrives, the Mister, the list goes on and on. This ain't goodbye, it's just a see ya later. Alright, but that about does it for all my thoughts, and hopefully I've gotten most of you to at least consider consolidating. And like I keep saying, doesn't mean you ultimately will sell any of your games, but I hope that in any case, it has made you feel vindicated in why you have the games that you do. Perhaps you may just want to pass all your games on to your kids and let them decide what to keep or sell off. But like always, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to leave a comment, and I will see ya in the next video.
He's the retro bird, yeah, and he's talking about video games. He's the retro